Boulder schools open their doors to people who need to talk, not just students. Words are not coming easy this week. Ask a man whose job it is to make small talk with strangers.
It's as though people have run out of words to describe their feelings about what has happened.
The words of some victims' families have changed the way that I look at this memorial and others like it. We spent a week with the vaccine teams taking you inside the process from ordering to scheduling to shots. And it is the simplest good news yet. All that is next. We have prepared our schools for the potential of mass violence. The attack in Boulder this week happened at a grocery store. But it is their school district prepared for trauma that's now stepping in to help the community. Not just students, parents too. Here's Anusha Roy.
Monday afternoon, a Boulder Valley School District employee was inside the grocery store. The district says they've heard about courageous King Soopers employees moving people, including their colleague, into offices and closets away from the shooting.
Our community needs that support. And the people who were in King Soopers are parents of our students. And that's our response. And BVSD is part of the community. BVSD is the community. So it's in that sense that we're responding, not knowing who is there.
The district is also deeply mourning. Denny Stong and Ricky Olds were graduates. Two other victims, Kevin Mahoney and Suzanne Fountain, were parents of graduates.
We've had families that just live really close to the store, and we've also had a parent that was actually in the store when everything happened.
Boulder Valley knew people would turn to them, and they had counseling sessions this morning. And not only have students come in, but so have their families.
And when they're leaving, they're like, thank you. Thank you for talking to us.
Students as young as pre-K or kindergarten that needed support, as well as parents that need support. So we've had all in between.
Everybody goes to the supermarket, so it doesn't have to be the King Soopers in Boulder, Colorado. It could be any King Soopers. And trauma affects us differently. So we want to make sure that even though you weren't there, you could be experiencing something as well.
The district is making sure people are in place at every school to help, while also leaning on each other to make sure those offering help offer the same to themselves, because they'll be here in the long run for anyone who needs it.
The district is playing, I think, a vital role because I believe that it's the hub of the community. So we want to make sure that our families and staff are taken care of.
And in the same way that you heard about the district talking about the counselors and the mental health advocates taking care of themselves, they're saying the same thing to the parents and the students as well. And they know a lot of people are having some really difficult conversations within their families. And Kyle, if there's one thing they wanted people to know tonight was that you don't have to navigate all of that by yourself. They're there to help guide you through those conversations.
And Nusha, we should mention this happening while they're on spring break.
Yeah, so the students actually weren't in class all week, and they're going to be coming back, and early next week they're coming back to an expanded in-person learning. And so that's where we're going to see a lot of the layers of the counselors and the mental health advocates at each of those schools. And families should also know that, you can reach out directly to your counselor. You can go to the school district's website. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can connect with people right now if you need to get to those resources.
Thank you, Nusha. 4 days later, that grocery store is still a crime scene. You know how large King Soopers can be, and investigators are collecting evidence aisle by aisle. Now, this isn't a case where nobody's suggesting that they did not catch the right shooter. Marshall Zellinger looks at why investigators are still being so meticulous.
Investigators were back in the parking lot today at the Boulder King Soopers, going over evidence near the vehicle driven by Nevin Stanisic, one of the 10 victims killed on Monday. We learned today this process of evidence collection, particularly accounting for every bullet fired, will continue for a few more days.
If you picture a supermarket, picture all the shelves, all the products, everything. They're going through every single shelf pulling everything off the shelves, looking in the walls, and that is going to continue throughout the weekend.
There are surveillance cameras inside the grocery store and no suggestion that there is someone else responsible for the shootings. So why do investigators need to pull every item off every shelf?
Is that bullet traceable through ballistics back to the alleged offender's weapon, or is it traceable to a police officer's weapon that was fired in the store? I mean, all of those questions have to be answered as best they can.
Ron Sloan, former Colorado Bureau of Investigation director, explained it's about providing proof at a trial.
That defendant will have defense counsel. They will challenge the admissibility of every single piece of evidence that's placed into evidence in that case. It's the responsibility of the police in providing that evidence and putting it into context.
A lot of people I know say, wait, there's video evidence. Why not just start from there? And the answer is our system is premised on these important traditions that if you're a defendant, you have a right to cross-examine all the witnesses, contest all the evidence. And if you're the prosecution, you bear the burden of proof. And so that's why the Boulder DA is taking this so seriously, and there are no shortcuts.
Methodical collection of evidence to explain to a jury the who, what, where, when, and how, which perhaps will lead to the why.
I recognize that people are anxious, are impatient, and the answer is this is all going to take time.
I fall back on my experience from the Aurora Theater trial and understanding all of the evidence collection leads to graphics and slides and anything visual to show a jury to help solidify everything that they have found inside and can cross every T and dot every I and tell that jury we did everything possible to prove to you everything we've shown you is because of the defendant over there.
Almost like, Marshall, they don't want to open up the opportunity for the defense team at any point to say, well, what about that? And have the answer come back, oh, we don't know. We didn't look there. Or we didn't write that down. We didn't take that picture, collect that evidence.
You ask that once and it starts to make a house of cards, like perhaps some other piece of evidence isn't good enough. And so that's why it's so meticulous.
All right, Marshall, thank you for your work this week. You can sense it, even from strangers, that people are hurting right now. Ask Ron Booth. He drives for Lyft, and he told us he noticed a sudden change after Monday's mass shooting. He told our Tom Cole, Coloradans just seem to be at a loss for words this week.
On the back of the passenger side seat of my Lyft, I've got a little sign that lets passengers know that any and all civil conversations are welcomed and encouraged. What I've seen since this Boulder shooting is that all my passengers, almost without exception, have gone absolutely silent. We've been down this road so many times since Columbine 22 years ago, it's as though people have run out of words to describe their feelings about what has happened, because it's all been said just so damn many times, and still nothing seems to change. And the arguments are always so ridiculous. It's like, well, this law or that action won't solve it. Well, no law has ever solved anything. But most any law has always improved a situation from what it was. I feel compelled to say something to my passengers, and at the same time, I have to respect the fact that they're kind of stuck in the same place that I'm stuck. We're all in this together. My hope was that in sharing what I was feeling, what I was experiencing, that it might help others to engage, at least with their own family and friends, about what they're feeling about these things.
The perspective of an ex-viewer and Lyft driver named Ron Booth. So I've struggled this week, talked about it here, with some of the public rituals of grief. All of the now very familiar things that we see and hear and say following each mass shooting. I've struggled with how useful it is. I mean, right down to our role as journalists in the process. I've wondered about the temporary memorials that we build at these spots, whether they're a useful way to channel a community's grief, or if they're something akin to just putting an image on our social media pages and then moving along. 2 of the 10 victims' families in Boulder brought up the memorial there to us yesterday, brought it up unprompted. and they offered some new perspectives to consider. The Mahoney family told me how much it meant to them to see Kevin Mahoney's name written there again and again. It was the time that people took to learn his name and then to write it out that stuck with the Mahoneys. Lynn Murray's husband described that block-long fence turned now into a multi-layered memorial as the wall that his community has put up to protect him from seeing the spot where his wife died. John called it his buffer, his hope, and his joy. That's a very meaningful thing. So it's what I will now choose to see there. Never has a conference room been so important.
If we don't get them this week, do we want to open that up or do we want to hold?
A week-long trip through the vaccine process, from ordering the doses to scheduling your appointments. We'll learn what needs to happen to speed it up. Next. You've always shared your vaccine appointments and struggles, celebrations with us, and your stories lately suggest it's getting easier as the vaccine supply increases. Our Steve Steger and photojournalist Chris Hansen spent a week with Kaiser Permanente to look at the inside of the system.
So then the total for Lakewood, the 4440, is good? Yes. Okay, perfect.
Before any needle ends up in an arm, before the mad rush to schedule an appointment.
If we don't get them this week, do we want to open that up or do we want to hold?
The vaccine process for Kaiser Permanente begins here in a conference room in Lone Tree.
On Monday, we put a request into the state for the amount of vaccine that we have the capacity to administer in the following 7 days.
Kelly Kane is in charge of logistics.
We then began to plan and look at how many second doses we have that are already booked.
22,000 roughly are for second doses.
On Monday, Kaiser submits what amounts to be a wish list for each of its facilities.
Right.
They walked us through their ordering process for the week of March 1st. This system could handle quite a bit of vaccine.
We know that we can administer up to 50,000 doses in a 7-day period.
They've never really come close to that number, though, because the supply just doesn't exist yet.
But it still fluctuates based on other priorities the state may have. 1 week we might get 5,000 doses. The next week we might get 17,000 doses.
After that order form is submitted on Monday, the wait begins.
We then wait to hear from the state between Friday and Saturday, or Sunday even, what our supply allocation will be for the following week.
In this case, Kaiser found out their allocation on Thursday. They got notice of shipment on Sunday, and the next day, Monday morning, doses were already showing up at their clinics. It's only after this moment, the delivery, that the health system actually invites people from its list to schedule an appointment.
We have learned that it's much better to wait than it is to schedule those appointments in anticipation of vaccine, and then there be some sort of a challenge with the delivery.
But she says the system is moving as fast as it can with the supply it has. Hopefully news of increased supply on the horizon will help.
What would be more beneficial for us is more predictability. I don't know that that's possible until we get more vaccine.
We're next.
Thank you, you too.
I'm Steve Steger.
Now, that's just 1 week. Kaiser tells us the whole process is fluid. Sometimes it'll take 7 days for the state to tell them how much vaccine is coming their way. Sometimes they'll get a surprise shipment midweek that they can add to the supply. It's been a learning process for them as well. They say that they have adapted and changed everything from how they order the vaccines to how they plan their clinics.
For caring about who she represents, she was called a terrorist.
He's a sheriff. His job is to enforce the law. She passed a law he didn't like, so he called her a terrorist. And it is our simplest good news segment yet. And it's next. Weld County Sheriff Steve Reams, possible Republican candidate for statewide office, called one of the most prominent women of color at the state capitol a terrorist this week. Sheriff Reams' comment about Democratic Representative Leslie Herod of Denver has brought bipartisan condemnation. Reams was speaking to a group of citizens asking him about open rebellion against the government. Reams criticized Herod's police reform legislation, called her a terrorist.
Often we find ourselves at the other end of words of death. I think it is even more important for all of us to remember, and I say this to you, Representative Herod, specifically, you are loved. You are amazing. You are worthy and adored.
Which I've passed many controversial bills. I've brought many controversial bills and lost. And I've never been called a terrorist for doing my job. And I think that's because I'm a privileged white woman. And this member's not.
Representative Herod herself called Sheriff Reams' comment dangerous. She noted there are now state troopers assigned to protect her house because of the threats she's receiving. Sheriff Reams said he wasn't available to talk to us today.
A storm will bring rain and snow showers to the metro area overnight, and then a major pattern shift that will allow for a warming and drying trend, and we'll be done with the storms for a few days. March is one for the record books, and we've got additional snow in the high country tonight, but no advisories for travel. The rain and snow ends by early tomorrow morning, and so we have a clear day tomorrow, a sunny day, and a warmer day. Your weekend forecast in detail. Cloudy with rain and snow tonight, our low 28, overnight clearing, and that means temperatures will soar tomorrow, leading to a high in the lower 50s, still below average, but warmer. And speaking of warmer, mid-60s on Sunday, 70 Monday. Next storm is Tuesday with our next chance for rain and snow the middle part of next week.
Second edition of your Friday Good News is the shortest and sweetest yet. We want to be respectful of all the Coloradans who might be apprehensive about coming on to glow about wonderful news in a week when so many are heartbroken. So our good news this week is a simple hug. It's our viewer Shira hugging her father Richard for the first time in 12 months. So perhaps not a simple hug. They are both now vaccinated. They decided to wait until this moment to embrace for the first time in the pandemic. Your Word of Thanks campaign this week is lifting Boulder up, both now and in the future. We just got an update about the extent of your generosity. It is one of your largest fundraising efforts ever. That's next. The Boulder County Crisis Fund was launched by a longtime nonprofit in that community this week to meet the short-term financial needs of the victims' families as well as long-term support for Boulder community's healing. Next viewers have now raised $250,000 to get that fund started. $5 from a whole lot of Coloradans goes a long way. If you'd like to donate, you can text THANKS to 303-871-1491. I'll shoot you that link. $250,000 from this viewing community for that community in Boulder, those families in particular. It's going to go a long way. Let's smile in your feedback tonight, shall we? Mindy says, I miss you being in your basement. It's more personal. Mindy, events took me to Boulder this week and here to this studio, but look for something from the fireplace set up before too long. A Twitter DM from Addie tonight simply says, I don't like your suit. So I scroll back in the Twitter DMs to see what Addie and I have talked about before. And the first message was August 2nd, 2019, when Addie said she didn't like my suit. So I pulled the card out of the pocket where I write down each night that I wear them, and sure enough, same suit. Addie's consistent. I admire that. That's great. I'll see you next time.